Welcome to the Rearchitect Show. This is a show where we discuss issues that startups face. And today we're talking about scalability issues. How do you handle massive amounts of traffic and large numbers of users? Today my guest, Ben Kamens, who's the lead engineer at Khan Academy, joins us for a discussion. Ben, for those who haven't heard, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Khan Academy, what your mission is, and what you do for your users.
Yeah, absolutely. So Khan Academy's mission statement is to provide a free world-class education to anyone, anywhere. It's a large mission statement, so we can't claim that we do anything remotely close to that yet, but we are trying. I guess the simple breakdown of what we do is anybody can come to Khan Academy's site and hopefully try to learn anything, but right now it's really about learning math and some other things like art history and other stuff like that. So when somebody comes to our site, they can interact with a number of videos that they can watch. Some of those videos will ask people questions to help advance their understanding. They can work through a tree of math problems, and basically you could start at 1 + 1 and work your way all the way down to calculus, and the site should interact with you and tell you what you're succeeding at and what you're failing at, and hopefully help guide you to mastery of whatever you're trying to learn. That is the long-term goal. So that's kind of the user side, and then we have a story in our classrooms where teachers are actually using this with lots of their students, and then using data that we give them to learn more about how their students are doing in specific areas.
Okay, great. So maybe to set a little bit of context, how many users does Khan Academy see?
Yeah, so I guess it depends how you look at it. I think right now Google Analytics has us around 5 or 6 million per month. Registered users, I'm not sure what the total number is now. It's somewhere in the, it's definitely in the millions. I'm not sure how many, I think it's over 5, less than 15 million, somewhere in there, somewhere in there users.
So you have a lot of recurring users then.
Yeah. Hopefully more and more as time goes on. We're trying to build a site that brings people back. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe tell us a little bit about how you got to that many users. Obviously, you started with 0 users, and then you started to see kind of your application grow, your site traffic grow, and then at some point, presumably, you ran into kind of the first scalability issues, and maybe tell us a little bit about that and how you addressed any problems that you saw.
Yeah, it's kind of actually an interesting story even from before anybody joined Khan Academy, and it was just Sal Khan making his videos.
Yeah.
Because he knew from the beginning that he wanted an interactive part of his site, but then he started making videos to complement the interactive part. So just as an example, he had some math problems that he would have people work on interactively, and then he built videos to help people understand how to do those math problems. So the result of that in terms of a scalability effect is that his videos started to get really popular, and they were hosted on YouTube, and nobody has to worry about scalability of YouTube. You guys take care of that, right? Yeah. So YouTube scaled, and you got a whole bunch of users watching the videos, and then he started pointing more people at the site. And this was before it was on App Engine. It was on some self-hosted Java thing. And basically, as soon as he started pointing his big audience to that site, there were DB connection failures and all this various stuff. And so he, again, back when it was just Sal, switched everything to App Engine because I think different than a lot of startups, he immediately had an audience waiting from having built it on YouTube. Okay. So he basically switched this audience. It wasn't huge. It wasn't in the millions, but at least tens, hundreds of thousands. Switched the code over to App Engine, pointed users at that, and then was able to start slowly building the foundation of a non-YouTube site that could handle some of the traffic. So that's the really early story. Then after that, we basically just kept growing, it's gotten a lot of press and a lot of attention over time, and so it's kind of naturally snowballed.
Okay. So it's taking that. If you were there in kind of the very early days, even before kind of pointing more users to the site, what would you have done differently?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think Sal learned his lesson really early. I don't think it makes sense for any startup to not be on some provider like App Engine or EC2 or whatever is going to solve a lot of the scalability problems that you don't want to solve by having your own servers. I think that's just a no-brainer these days. And that way, if you get picked up and you get a lot of attention early, whether it's from having a lot of videos or from getting blog attention, you have a chance to scale immediately just by throwing more money at the problem. That's something that you want to be able to do. Yeah. So I think that's kind of if you're not doing that, the rest of my advice probably won't be much use to you. That's kind of step one.
Okay. So you talked about a couple of technology options. How does the technology that you choose kind of affect your ability to scale? Obviously, if you're just renting virtual machines, you can get more of them, but does that address your scalability, or are there other dimensions to the choice that are like really important to get right?
Yeah, there are certainly other dimensions, and people have solved this other ways, in various ways. I think there's obviously a spectrum of how much of a scalability solution you get out of the box from whoever you're working with. And it's basically a spectrum of how much control do you want versus how much immediate scalability do you want. Okay. And the more control you get, the more you're likely to have shot yourself in the foot or to not configure something correctly and get something wrong. Okay. So I would say, if a service like App Engine gives you tons and tons and tons of scalability right out of the box, and you as long as your credit card is plugged in, you're not going to have many scalability problems. A service like Amazon services can be similarly great, but depending on how you configure them, you need to be a little more on your game and have a little bit more awareness of how to roll up instances and all the various tricks that you have to know on AWS. And so they're both great solutions, in my opinion. Perfectly legitimate for any startup to choose either one right now, but there are definite trade-offs in terms of how much time you have to focus on the scalability solution.
Okay. Now, with scalability, there's kind of another dimension that I think sometimes early startups forget to look at, or they imagine they'll deal with it later, which is kind of the availability of the application. So they start out hosting in, whether it's their own servers or in a data center somewhere, they're in one place, and then when they realize that they need some redundancy for data center failures or network cuts, they suddenly need to figure out how to replicate their data across regions. Yeah. Is that something you've had to deal with at all? Or?
Yeah, so we can luckily say no. That and many other things, because we went the more automatic route and the using App Engine route. That's all kind of taken care of for us. So thanks to your team, we've never, let alone worried about replication, we've never restarted a server or an instance. We don't carry pagers. That has enormous benefit for a team that's trying to focus on a specific hard problem like educational technology. We don't want to restart servers. We want to talk to teachers. So that has had an enormous impact on our ability to focus on the problem at hand, because we're not worried about that sort of thing. So while I wish I could give more actionable advice there, I have to be honest, I'm not an expert at that at all. But that's the whole point.
No, that's a great point about not restarting servers and everything that comes along with that, like not applying OS patches, not worrying about those sort of software installs and upgrades. It's your application code that you want to worry about, because that's where you're adding.
Yep, I mean it's an abstraction over all that stuff, so you can focus on the business. All abstractions leak. Nothing is perfect. You're going to have to deal with problems no matter what you choose. We chose a higher level of abstraction. It's paid off pretty well so far.
Okay. Well, so on this theme of scalability, many startups at some point experience this TechCrunch effect of they get posted on a prominent blog, and suddenly traffic just goes through the roof. Are there other things startups can do to kind of take care of that, or should they just cross their fingers and hope it'll all be fine?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our big experience with this is 60 Minutes. So we've been featured on a lot of blogs, a lot of things like TechCrunch, Reddit, Hacker News, all that stuff, right? All of that traffic combined doesn't even come close to what 60 Minutes delivered when they featured us. It wasn't even close. It's a different sort of traffic, right? Yeah. It's all, we can cut this out. It's all Internet Explorer. It's a different sort of traffic. But 60 Minutes delivers a lot of traffic, and so we've been on it a couple times. The first time, we basically knew that there was going to be a lot of traffic, and were prepared to turn the right dials in App Engine so that we could get more instances easily, and we did that. But other than that, we were kind of crossing our fingers, and that was a mistake. And I do think we have actionable advice to give after that. The mistake was that while we were prepared to turn the right dials, we hadn't really simplified the experience that people were going to get. So as a result, we were doing a whole lot of work that didn't need to be done for every user. A very specific example is we thought, oh cool, we're getting all this 60 minutes traffic. Let's for the first time ever run an A/B test on our homepage and track all the data that comes with that with our custom A/B solution, right? Which was a terrible mistake, a really stupid mistake. The actionable advice that we should have taken, which we took for follow-up 60 minutes pieces, was the main experience that all that traffic is going to go to, just make sure it's clean and simple. And if you have to track data, make sure it's important data that you're tracking and that that's a well-tested data tracking solution, and that you're not running code you don't need to code for all that traffic that's going to be kind of a one-time spurt. Because you only get that thing one time, and if, like us, half of the East Coast feed can't access the site because you tried to track too much data, that's not worth it. So for the West Coast feed and for all follow-up 60 minutes pieces, we basically said, all right, look, the homepage is just going to be as static as we can make our homepage. It's simple, it loads quickly. People who branch off from that can get the rest of the experience, but let's just simplify for the traffic, for the incoming traffic.
So what about load testing? Is that something you'd done up until that point? Is it possible to even predict at what scale, what type of what load testing advice can you give? Yeah,
that's a good question. So we haven't done enough load testing. We have, we thought from all of our previous press pushes that we had, from the spikes that we've seen, that we had enough. We had no idea how much traffic 60 minutes would give us, and we hadn't tested that amount. So if you can test the right amount then do it. We are fortunate enough to be, again, sorry for not actionable advice, but we're fortunate enough to be in a situation where the traffic is pretty high consistently, we think. It also tends to be a little bit spiky consistently due to people being in using really heavily during school.
Sure.
And it's also pretty seasonal, so it tends to stress our systems in a good way, and that we have to be able to handle spikes and valleys, and we have to be able to handle months where it's really active and then December where it's not very active at all. And so I think that has helped us balance things a little bit more, because we know we need to configure our code and app engine right to be able to handle that spike. So our load testing has been a little bit more natural. I guess my actionable advice here is we got away without doing a ton of it, but it's probably smart to do more of it.
Okay. So how early on should startups worry about load testing and scale? Should that be something they think about out of the box, or is it just a select few who know they're going to be very popular out of the gate? And how do you divide up the work? Do you have like a dedicated scalability team, and then people working on features, or does everyone need to think about scalability? Yeah,
so I'll tell you what we did, which was basically try not to worry about it at the start by offloading as much work as you can to somebody else, which in our case is you guys. Okay. And that was huge. That lasted until we had around 9 or 10 employees, and at that point we felt like when we hit performance problems, it was no longer acceptable to basically just patch over it and hope it goes okay next time.
Yeah.
And so at that point, and we're obviously still startup size, but a little bit bigger than 2 or 3 people. Yeah. At that point, we were willing to say, for your quarter, these 2 people are just focused on performance, and build dashboards so we can predict problems ahead of time, and try to spot try to be a little bit more proactive about our performance issues and our scalability issues, and tracking all that information.
Okay.
So for us, that was around 9 or 10 people. It really depends, I guess, on the problem you're solving and how much traffic you're going to immediately get. I would say that's not what you want to be doing when you are a 2 to 5 person organization. There are too many ways to have somebody else solve that problem for you, or some other system worry about scalability, than for you to have to focus on that.
Okay, so it's really focus on the features and capabilities that
make your thing great.
Your startup.
Make your startup great. Make your product great. Get users coming back to it, and then then you can over-engineer all you want once you've got a successful business.
Yeah.
If you do that ahead of time, I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. It's too easy to use App Engine or EC2 or whatever it is that's going to solve these problems for you, because nobody's paying. Your site needs to stay up. Period.
Yep.
Get something that stays up, and then worry about the problems when you have a chance to build a successful product.
Okay. So on the division of labor, when you were at that 9 or 10 people, did everyone focus on scalability, or did you have like a SWAT team that kind of dealt with the problems?
Yeah, so we have on our list of things that people are working on. At the very top is one that's not assigned to anybody, and it says performance is everyone's job, and it's just everybody's assigned to it. So we do require, and we try to build a culture of awareness of performance, which is the necessary thing to do. Because as you know, once you have a performance problem, somebody's going to be the hero by solving the 80% problem, and that goes out of the way. And after that, it's a game of 1%, 0.5%, quarter of a percent. That's the only way to get to a faster site. And it is great to have people dedicated to that, but at the same time, if you have a bunch of people who are just throwing extra JavaScript in every minute or adding new database queries, whatever they're doing, it's just going to slow your site down. So we try to build performance awareness into the entire team, and then we basically have had quarters where a 1 or 2 person team is solely focused on proactive performance improvement, whether that takes the form of actually changing our code to make it faster or building tools so that we are more aware of our own performance.
Okay,
That's
so
what we do.
Can I imagine that more as a kind of a dedicated Fixit? Like we're going to set some time aside, not stop features entirely, but we're going to focus on scalability for a week, for a month, for a quarter, something, until we get back on track.
We've basically done that for a quarter with small teams, and I love the idea. We have stolen Google's idea of Fixits, so we haven't had a performance Fixit yet, but I think that's an awesome idea, whether it's a day or a week. You're going to get big wins when you focus on performance, and even more importantly, you'll build that culture into your team, a culture of caring about speed. And so I guess, the Fixit's a great idea.
Okay. As you've grown through kind of the different levels of scale, when you go 10x from your initial size and then 100x and 1,000, have you gotten to a point where you've said, okay, we need to kind of re-architect either our data store, the way we store and access data for more efficient patterns, or fundamentally change the way the code behaves? Or has it always grown organically and kind of very small step function worked its way up?
It grew organically, I would say, for about a year and a half, and then we got to the point where you have to fix some of the underlying issues. We certainly haven't fixed them all, but some of the big ones that we've started to address, and some of the pain points that got most painful for us are that we're collecting all this data, and more and more users are coming in, we're getting more and more data. In our case, we wanted to report a lot of that data to teachers or to other people. So now, after a year of a couple classrooms of 100 kids using the site every day in school, it's tons and tons of data for us to analyze and present to the teacher in a nice way. And so our old data storage system was unable to report on that. And so we had to basically go back and rethink. We need to do it again. But we had to go back and basically rethink how we summarize all this data, how we accumulate it over time, start rolling things up, and basically follow Google's principles of do a whole bunch of work when writing the data so that reading the data is fast. And we had to basically build that belief into our team of re-architect data, copy it everywhere, make it really fast to analyze later. And that took a lot of learning for us. And transparency, we're still not there, but we've started to re-architect things and do better.
Okay, so it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If you have advice, you guys always have great advice for us. So
I think you're taking the right approach. I think you have to spend a certain amount of time, and then while you can't throw it all away because you have a live website, you have changes that you're making. I think occasionally you do need to kind of dedicate some time and say, okay, let's fundamentally change the way we do something, but in a controlled fashion. So you have traffic that's 24/7. People are using the site, and you don't want. I always chuckle a little bit when I try to make a deposit in my bank or look at my bank account, and the bank website is down for 4 hours a night because they're doing some batch processing. And this feels like I'm still in the 60s. So doing things in a live system is a little bit like doing maintenance on an aircraft while it's in the air, flying. Something you can do, but it takes a certain amount of discipline. But you can do really interesting things because you never stop. So you're never kind of losing that momentum or losing traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really related to your previous question about how much do you immediately focus on this stuff? Because there's no point in obsessing over that hard problem of building another airplane if your first airplane isn't already really in the air and flying. So waiting until you definitely need this feature and everybody's demanding it before you spend a whole bunch of time coming up with a nice data architecture is a really important.
Okay, so taking the analogy there, it's like get your aircraft in the air.
Yep.
And then worry about making it pretty and perform
Use somebody
better.
else's engines. Get up there. Yep.
Maybe an app engine. Okay, great.
Yep.
A lot of companies are talking about a new type of organization called, or organization in your company called DevOps, developer operations, and it's kind of merging with IT operations. Is DevOps something you subscribe to? Is that a term you use at Khan Academy?
It's not a term we use right now. I'll be honest and be clear when I'm not an expert. I'm definitely not an expert here. It is something that I was familiar with in my previous job when we weren't using a cloud provider, whatever you want to call it. And it was obviously extraordinarily important. Right now our team is small enough, still around 15, 16 engineers, for everybody to be kind of a dev, and everybody's responsible for keeping the site up. I could see a time when we have accumulated enough specific systems that are outside of App Engine that will require other people, our time, to make sure they're perfectly optimized and they're working well. We're not there right now. We've so far benefited from just kind of sticking with mostly just App Engine.
Okay. So maybe in parting you can leave kind of, if you have one piece of advice, something, a kind of wisdom that you want to pass on to startups, or and it doesn't have to be one thing, but what would you tell the would-be startup that is now, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I know I certainly won't claim to know everything here, but I guess if I were going back, I would encourage myself to just keep things really, really simple, both technically and in your product. Keep things simple until you know absolutely what you need to build, and then build that thing. Most of the pain we've caused ourselves has been from, not most of the pain, but a lot of the pain we've caused ourselves has been from these various things that we built at one time to help somebody in some edge case, and turns out that thing can cause a real problem for everybody else in some way. And it's hard to turn things off once you build them. So I guess just kind of keep things simple, build what you need, and go from there.
Okay, that seems like really good advice. Don't build anything unless you have to.
Yep.
Really justify.
Yep. And take as much work as you can from somebody else. We are shamelessly lazy and willing to benefit from other people's work where possible. There's so many free tools and non-free tools that are totally worth the money that are great out there right now. So fight the tendency to build everything in-house.
Okay. Fight the natural engineering tendency.
Yeah, at least until, yes, exactly. It is a natural tendency. And it's a natural tendency to kind of not trust other people's code and want to code your own stuff. That's great, and there's totally valid reasons for that, especially once your business is doing really well. But until then, just
keep it simple.
Yeah, use other people's work.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks to your team for everything.
Okay, thanks for tuning in. This was an episode of Root Access. Check the schedule to see what episode's next and what topics we'll cover. Thanks for tuning in.